In the year 732, one battle changed the course of world history forever. If this single confrontation had gone differently, you might be speaking Arabic right now, and the entire trajectory of Western civilization would have been unrecognizable. This is the story of Charles Martel, a man whose victory at the Battle of Tours quite literally shaped the world we live in today. What I'm about to share with you is how a Frankish nobleman, born illegitimate and initially without major support, managed to unite former enemies into an unprecedented coalition that would face down what many historians consider the greatest existential threat Christianity had ever encountered. We'll explore the political genius, military innovation, and sheer determination that earned Charles the nickname the Hammer, and discover why this 8th century battle continues to influence global politics over 1,300 years later. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what happened at Tours, but why this moment represents one of history's most decisive turning points. Let's dive in. To understand the magnitude of Charles Martel's achievement, we need to grasp the scale of the challenge he faced. Picture this. By 714 AD, Muslim forces from North Africa had launched a devastating invasion of Spain. Within just 10 years, they controlled 3/4 of the Iberian Peninsula. But they didn't stop there. Between 724 and 726, these forces began probing into southern France, specifically targeting the wealthy province of Aquitaine. By 728, the situation had become so critical that Christian Europe faced what many scholars describe as an existential crisis. Here's what made this threat so unprecedented. This wasn't just another territorial dispute between neighboring kingdoms. The Islamic expansion represented a completely different civilization, religion, and way of life advancing into the heart of Christian Europe. The invading forces were battle-hardened, well-organized, and had already demonstrated their ability to conquer and hold vast territories. The monasteries, convents, and churches of southern France were being systematically destroyed. The very foundations of Christian European society were under direct assault. And here's the crucial point. No single European power was strong enough to resist this advance alone. Enter Charles Martel, and this is where our story becomes truly fascinating. Charles was born around 686 to 688 AD, the son of Pepin II and his mistress Alpida. Now being illegitimate in medieval Europe was typically a career-ending disadvantage. Charles had no automatic claim to power, no guaranteed support from the nobility, and initially no backing from the church. But what Charles lacked in birthright, he made up for in political genius and tactical brilliance. When his father Pepin died in 714, Charles found himself in an incredibly precarious position. His stepmother Plectrude wanted him eliminated, not just politically, but potentially physically. She even had him imprisoned in Cologne to prevent him from challenging her chosen heir, the child Theodoald. Here's where Charles's remarkable character first emerges. He escaped from prison and, through sheer force of personality and strategic thinking, convinced the Austrasian nobles to acclaim him as mayor. This wasn't just luck. This was a man who understood how to read people, how to build alliances, and how to turn disadvantages into opportunities. The most incredible part, when Duke Odo of Aquitaine, his father's former enemy, approached Charles for help against the Muslim incursions, Charles didn't just accept. He saw an opportunity to create something unprecedented in European history. a multinational coalition that would unite former enemies against a common threat. Think about the diplomatic skill required here. Charles managed to forge alliances with the Saxons, Burgundians, Bavarians, Alemanni, Aquitanians, Frisians, and even the Lombards. This was the first time in European history that such a diverse coalition had been assembled under a single command. Now here's where Charles Martel's tactical genius truly shines, and this part of the story reads like something from a modern military thriller. Charles faced a seemingly impossible challenge. His opponent, al-Rahman, commanded approximately 40,000 battle-tested warriors. Charles, even with his coalition, could muster at most 25,000 men. In medieval warfare, being outnumbered nearly 2-to-1 was typically a death sentence. But Charles had something his enemy didn't expect: a master plan built on deception, terrain selection, and psychological warfare. First, the deception. For over a month, Charles allowed Muslim spies to observe his forces, but they only ever saw about 5,000 men. The bulk of his army remained hidden in forests and behind hills. From the Muslim perspective, they were facing a token resistance force that would be easily swept aside. Second, terrain selection. According to historical accounts, Charles chose his battlefield with almost supernatural precision. Legend says his wife Swanhild, considered a seer, prophesied 12 days of rain followed by a single beam of light that would illuminate the perfect battleground. Whether you believe in prophecy or not, Charles selected a location that was tactically brilliant. A river on one side preventing flanking maneuvers, forests on the other concealing his archers, and hills hiding his cavalry. Third, the psychological element. Charles carried what was believed to be the spear of destiny, the legendary spear that pierced Christ's side. Whether authentic or not, this relic galvanized his diverse coalition under a single spiritual banner. Even pagan allies like the Frisian leader Bobo saw that Charles possessed something special. The battle plan itself was masterful. Charles would allow the Muslims to attack first, letting their cavalry charge into what appeared to be a small, defensive force. But what they actually charged into was a carefully orchestrated killing field. October 732. The moment of truth had arrived, and what happened next would echo through history for over a millennium. al-Rahman, confident in his numerical superiority and seeing only a small Frankish force, ordered his cavalry to charge. This was standard Muslim military doctrine: use superior mobility and shock tactics to break enemy lines quickly. But Charles had turned the battlefield into a trap. The recent rains had turned the ground into a muddy quagmire that bogged down the charging horses. As the Muslim cavalry struggled through the mud, Charles's hidden archers emerged from the forests and unleashed devastating volleys. Historical accounts from Arab chroniclers describe the carnage in stark terms. Approximately 5,000 cavalry, both horses and riders, were cut down in the first 25 to 30 minutes of battle. But al-Rahman, still believing he faced only a small force, continued sending wave after wave of cavalry into the same killing field. When the Muslim infantry finally advanced, they met the same fate. Bogged down in mud and cut down by archers, they couldn't effectively reach or counter. Then Charles revealed his masterstroke. At the crucial moment, he released his hidden infantry and cavalry in a coordinated flanking maneuver along the woodline. The Muslims found themselves completely encircled, attacked from all sides by forces they never knew existed. The victory was so complete that Muslim chroniclers called it the Road of Martyrs or the Highway of Martyrs, because the dead stretched from the battlefield near Tours all the way back toward the Spanish border. al-Rahman himself was killed in the fighting, and the few survivors were deliberately allowed to escape to carry word of the Christian victory back to Spain. The Battle of Tours wasn't just a military victory. It was a civilizational turning point whose effects we still feel today. Most immediately, it ended the Islamic expansion into Western Europe. The message was clear. Christian Europe would not fall without a fight, and that fight could be won. No major Muslim invasion of France was ever attempted again. But the deeper impact was the creation of what we might call the First European Union. Charles's coalition proved that former enemies could unite against common threats. This model would influence European politics for centuries to come. Charles's victory also established the foundation for the Carolingian dynasty. His son Pepin the Short would become the first Carolingian king of France, and his grandson Charlemagne would create the Holy Roman Empire, becoming the first emperor in Western Europe since the fall of Rome. Think about this. Without Charles Martel's victory, there might have been no Charlemagne, no Holy Roman Empire, no medieval European kingdoms as we know them. The Renaissance, the age of exploration, the development of Western universities, the scientific revolution, all of these might have taken completely different forms or might never have happened at all. Some historians argue that Charles Martel's victory preserved not just Christianity, but the entire trajectory of Western civilization. The cultural, scientific, and political developments that emerged from medieval Europe and eventually spread globally all trace back, in part, to that muddy battlefield in 732. Charles Martel earned his nickname, the Hammer, not just for his military prowess, but for his ability to forge something entirely new from the raw materials of crisis. He took personal disadvantage, political chaos, and existential threat, and hammered them into unity, victory, and lasting legacy. The next time you see a map of Europe, remember that its borders, languages, and cultures were shaped by decisions made by one illegitimate nobleman who refused to accept that the impossible couldn't be achieved. Charles Martel didn't just stop an invasion, he preserved a civilization and created the foundation for the world we inhabit today. His story reminds us that history's greatest turning points often depend on individuals who see opportunities where others see only obstacles, and who possess the courage to act when the stakes couldn't be higher. What do you think would have happened if Charles Martel had lost at Tours? Would Western civilization as we know it exist today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love discussing these historical what-ifs with you. If you found this deep dive into medieval history fascinating, make sure you're subscribed, because next week we're exploring another pivotal moment that shaped our world, the fall of Constantinople and how it triggered the age of exploration. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Wishing you brighter days ahead. Until the next video, goodbye.